Hi friends, welcome back. I have a question. Are you managing your mind? Now that might sound odd, but as you go through your day, if you're like me, you're managing so many things, people, projects, and expectations. But are you remembering to manage your own mind? Are you doing a good job of managing your thoughts, your perspectives, and even yourself? When you look over the course of your life and even look back over the course of your career, it's inevitable to experience rejection or something you might perceive as negative. You might have been rejected from a promotion or a position you applied for. You might have had to work on a dysfunctional team or for a dysfunctional boss. Or there might just be drama in your workplace. But have you ever wondered, how do I stop these experiences from keeping me stuck in negativity? How can I maintain a positive outlook no matter what the circumstance is? Well, stay tuned, because in this episode, I'll be sharing some insight on how you can neutralize negative thinking, change your perspectives, and manage your mind.
Welcome to the Elaborate Topics podcast, where we focus on lab-specific strategies for medical laboratory professionals. We're proud to be the healthcare detectives that work behind the scenes to get the results needed to influence medical decisions. Let's grow together and jump right into the lab.
Hi, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Elaborate Topics podcast. I'm your host for today's show, Stephanie Whitehead, and I'm so excited for another opportunity to coach you through all things laboratory and leadership. For those of you tuning in for the first time, Elaborate Topics is a weekly podcast where myself and my co-hosts, Taiwana Wilson and Lona Small, bring you topics related to laboratory and leadership that will help you excel inside and outside of the laboratory. So be sure to like this episode and share it with all of your laboratory friends. And also join our Elaborate Topics podcast group on LinkedIn, or you can follow me on social media at Stephanie Y. Whitehead. Again, as your coach for today's show, I'm really excited, so let's get into it. Real quick, I want you guys to imagine that you're working the bench, just working your area. If you're a phlebotomist, you're in your draw station. You're processing your samples, you're collecting your patients, you're going about your day. And your boss walks up to you and gives you a compliment. I mean, completely out of nowhere, they give you a compliment. For a moment, you feel a high level of satisfaction, perhaps even motivated excitement. Somebody on your job notices you and notices your good work, and that always feels really good. Now, next, let's say the same boss comes by the next day and gives you some negative feedback, or even feedback you perceive to be negative. Perhaps they point out an error you had made, or they question a result you put out, or actually, something you just perceive as negative. At that moment, you tend to feel down, even though you felt the opposite way the previous day. Even if your boss comes back the very next day, or even later on that same day, and gives you some positive feedback, for some of us, it's hard to get the thoughts and feelings of the negative feedback out of our mind. Why is that? Why does rejection seem to stick in our mind more than success does? That's why this episode is so important, because in this episode, I want to give you some tips on how to neutralize negative thoughts and change your perception. I want to call this episode Mind Management and teach you guys, or give you all some tips, coaching mechanisms and strategies on how to successfully manage your mind. I want to start this podcast by talking about an interesting study by a sociopsychologist that I recently came across. And this study was all about the way people think. In this study, the sociopsychologist really just looked into in-depth ways of how the human mind processes failure versus how we process perceived success. We all know and we've all heard that there are different ways of looking at a similar situation. You can go through something and it can be, the worst day of your life, while somebody else can go through a similar situation and it may not even bother them. There are many different ways to look at the same situation. And this is sometimes described by using the glass method. You may have heard before that the glass is either half full or half empty. So the same glass, depending on how you look at it, or depending on how somebody describes it to you, can be either half full or considered to be half empty. There's a lot of studies out there, and you can go out there and research them and look into them about how people view this glass based on how it is described to them. So if you describe the glass as half full, people tend to like the glass. This is called the gain frame because you're focusing on what you gain. If you focus on the glass being half empty or describe the glass as being half empty, people tend not to like the glass. This is called the loss frame because you're focusing on what you would be losing. So all of that was to set you up to tell you more about this interesting study that I came across. Well, in this study, researchers investigated how easy is it for people to actually switch in their minds between losses and gains. Now, this is all about how we perceive negativity versus how we perceive positivity. Basically, this study was trying to see if people could easily shift from one way of thinking to another. Can people easily view a positive or negative situation another way, or do they get stuck in thinking of it in one way in their mind? Now, this is really interesting. So to do this, the researchers gathered two groups of people and told them about a new surgical procedure. The first group, they described the surgical procedure in terms of gains. They said the procedure had a 70% success rate. In the second group, they did the opposite. They described the surgical procedure in terms of losses. They said to the group that the surgical procedure had a 30% failure rate. Now, this is the exact same procedure. They just focused half of the participants' attention on the gains, a 70% success rate, and the other half of the participants on the loss, the 30% failure rate. Well, to no surprise, the group that was told that the procedure had a 70% success rate liked the procedure. The group that was told that the procedure had a 30% failure rate did not like the procedure. Then they added a twist. The research team told the first group, hey, there's a 70% success rate, but that also means there's a 30% failure rate. And then guess what happened? Well, the first group didn't like the procedure anymore. They had changed their mind about the procedure after the failure rate had been explained to them. In the second group, they said the same thing. They said, hey, there's a 30% failure rate. That also means there's a 70% success rate. But what happened with the first group did not happen with the second group. The second group still did not like the procedure. They didn't change their minds. They seemed to be stuck in the negative perception they initially had about the procedure. Very interesting, right? They couldn't switch back. Even when given the option of looking at the procedure from a gain perspective or a positive one, they still did not like the procedure. In a second study, the same researchers conducted a different group and told them about a new governor who was running for re-election of a large state. These two groups were told that under the new governor, 10,000 jobs had been impacted. The first group, they described the jobs impacted in terms of gains. They said that 60% of jobs had been saved, and this group liked the governor. In the second group, they did the opposite. They described the jobs impacted in terms of losses. They said that 40% of jobs had been lost. This group, not surprisingly, did not like the governor. Again, they added the same twist. The research group told the first group that, hey, 60% jobs saved, but that also means that 40% of jobs were lost. And not surprisingly, just like the first study, the first group changed their mind about the governor. They no longer liked the governor. They went from a positive mind frame about him to a negative one. And the second group, they did the same thing. They said, hey, although 40% jobs were lost, that means 60% of the jobs had been saved. And just like in the first group, where we talked about the surgical procedure, this group still did not like the governor. They didn't change their mind. So what this study actually proved, and why it was so interesting to me, was that once that loss frame gets in your mind, it's hard to get it out of there. It is literally mentally harder to shift your mind from negative to positive than it is to shift your mind from positive to negative. You literally have to work harder to think positively once you start to think in a negative mindset. It's human nature. Once we start thinking negatively about something, it's hard to shift that process back. And if you think about it in your own life, once you start to feel like you're having a bad day, things snowball. I mean, one thing happens, then another, and it continues to compile this perception you have that you're having a bad day. So what's our strategy? How do we manage our minds? Because it's, like I said in the teaser, inevitable. It's inevitable that negative things, negative words, negative experiences will come our way. Well, I want to give you guys just a few strategies to help you along the way, since these things are bound to happen to all of us. So first, here's a couple of strategies to neutralize the negative thinking when it comes to your team. Now, we've done a couple of different podcasts about if you're a formal leader or an informal leader, or if you're just simply leading without a title. And I'll put those specific episodes in the show notes so you can go back and listen to those. But whether you have the official title of manager or supervisor or not, you can still lead your team. When it comes to your team, when you're working in the lab, you're working around your fellow coworkers, there are some common perceptions about the laboratory profession, specifically, that there's lack of appreciation, that laboratory professionals are not recognized, that we're behind the scenes individuals, that our pay and salary is not adequate, and that we don't have enough organizations advocating on our behalf. If you're looking at your workspace or your career, common negative emotions could be frustration, worry. You know, a lot of organizations during COVID have been downsizing, anger, dislike, unhappiness or disengagement, or even disappointment. So, like I said, although there are some common negative perceptions or emotions that come with our career or our profession, there's also strategies to help neutralize those negative thoughts. When it comes to your team, and I love this one, it's my favorite one, try starting your conversations with the phrase, "What's working well?" I often do this when I'm rounding with my employees, when I'm talking to people. The first thing I will ask is, what's working well? If you think about it, it's very easy for you to give me a laundry list of all the things that are not working well. And if I ask that question at the end of our conversation, it's hard for you to switch your mind from all of this complaining to finally something positive about the laboratory or something positive about our team. So I like to start my conversations by asking, hey, what's working well? What have we done great lately? Who can you recognize for going above and beyond? That forces a person to start this conversation in a positive mind frame and generally helps the conversation go in a more productive and constructive direction. Also, a second strategy would be aware of how you present change or how you present your data. You know, we've just said it's harder for people to flip from thinking negatively about something to thinking positively about something. So when you communicate change or when you review data with your team, try to be as clear and concise when discussing strategies and goals in all forms of communication as you can. Always be realistic Never overpromise anything that you can't deliver, and always give clear and concise updates to your team. The second strategy I want to review for you guys is how to neutralize negative thinking within yourself. Because if you think about it, yourself, your own actions, your own thoughts, your own feelings is really all you can control throughout your day. We all have heard other people say it, you can't control what other people do or say. And so really all you can do is manage your own thoughts and actions and activities. I like to call this your internal environment. Your external environment is your team and your family and your friends, but your internal environment are all those things intrinsic to your own characteristics and personalities. So when I say control your internal environment, I really mean managing your mind. And really by managing your mind, I mean, let's try to manage ourselves. Let's try to manage and be mindful of our own self-awareness. This could mean your own insecurities, your doubts, your fears, and ensuring that you are always seeing yourself clearly. You're understanding how your patterns and acknowledging how your actions impact others so you can effectively lead and work and be the best you can be every single day. For instance, managing our emotions. Good leaders know how to display their emotions and when to delay their emotions. And there's a lot of education and training and continuing education that you can get on emotional intelligence. There's also a great book out there called No Hard Feelings that really teaches you how to manage your emotions in a professional environment. You can manage your words. Sometimes we think it'll make us feel better to talk about all the negative things that have happened to us in the course of our day. So we get home and, we may get with our family, our friends, or our spouse, or our children, and just start to vent about all of the crazy things that happened to us in one day. And I'll admit, sometimes venting does feel good to get it out there and to get all the thoughts out of your head. But you should always vent with a purpose. Venting without a purpose is just complaining. And generally complaining at the end of it doesn't make you feel better. Usually it makes you feel worse because there's no action plan at the end. So learn to relive your experiences with purpose. What did you learn? What can you do different? And how can I change based on the experience that I just went through? Then manage your words accordingly. I'm venting with a purpose because at the end of this, I want to know how I can change. So if this situation happens to me again, I don't have to have the same outcome. I can learn how to turn a negative experience into my reason why. Rather than wasting my time and my talent and efforts on complaining, you can invest your time into ways that would enhance or improve or promote any area that you feel like needs that improvement. You can be the change you want to see. One thing that really helped me in this area is finding your passion. All of us have one. It might be mentoring new students or mentoring people who are going into a level of a profession that you already have. A lot of times I will mentor people who are new into management or new into a manager or supervisor or director role. Your passion might be teaching. Your passion might be coaching, but invest your time in others and help them grow and help others advance. That helps our entire profession advance. We're all on the same team. So spewing negativity and negative words isn't going to help move anything forward. Along those same lines, we need to manage our energy. The biggest enemy to energy is busyness. So think about the areas in your life where you have activity but no direction. So you're just doing things that don't matter. You might just be doing busy work, pulling reports and files that you just put away and don't ever look at, or pulling reports that you aren't tracking or trending or making an action plan for. Evaluate the areas where you feel like, okay, I'm just spinning around on this hamster wheel. I'm just doing busy work here. I'm not managing my energy. I'm wasting my time. Also, think about the areas in your day where you have conflict without resolution. You're not dealing with things. You're not approaching things. And there are, again, several different classes you can take if you are a person who tends to shy away from conflict resolution. There are great sessions on crucial conversations that will help you and lead you and guide you in excelling into having difficult conversations. But if you have conflict with no resolution, again, it's like going around in that hamster wheel because you can't really get to a point of success or productivity when in that area of your life. So make sure you're managing your energy. Also manage your thinking. Get in the habit of jotting things down, mentally processing, or even planning. I'm a very type A person, so I love lists. I love checklists. I love sticky notes. I love anything that is an app that helps you organize and quickly write things down. So figure out what works for you. You may not be as type A as I am, but figure out what works for you to manage your thinking, prioritize your thoughts, and get everything down so you can accomplish more in your day. If you're a manager or not, managing your thinking and taking the time to focus your energy, you will probably see improvement on how you manage your words. So if I'm focusing on my thinking and directing my energy into making sure I prioritize those things that I'm thinking about and getting those things done, I will most likely see an improvement in how I manage my words, because my words will be more focused and being a problem solver or being a solution orienter, things like that. Also manage your time and your priorities. This is particularly hard if you're in middle management because administration usually delegates to you. And you have to delegate to those people who are working hourly, but then you don't want them to have too much overtime, so you need to send them home. Middle managers are usually expected to work much longer hours than others. And Taiwana recently did a really great episode on how to delegate, and I'll also put those tips in our show notes also. But until you value your time, you won't be able to do anything with it. Nobody's going to value your time as much as you. Focus your time. Try to divide your work into one, working on what I'm strongest at, mastering something that I'm not strong at, and considering the areas that I need to improve next. Like I said, the biggest enemy to energy is busyness. So replace all of that busy work that you're doing with successful ways to manage your time, manage your priorities, manage your focus. Also, you need to manage your personal life. All of these things don't matter if my personal life is running crazy. You can do everything to manage yourself, but if your personal life is a mess, then what does that mean? And generally, if our personal lives are a mess, then we're bringing some aspect of that to our professional lives, and that is usually very difficult for our teams when people bring their home life to work, and that's showing up in how we work with our teams. So make sure that you're also managing your personal life. And the last strategy I have for neutralizing negative thinking is neutralizing the negativity about your profession. Now, this is a laboratory podcast, and we are laboratory co-hosts. So I'm going to focus this next topic on the laboratory profession. But if you are not in the laboratory profession, you can really apply these strategies to whatever profession that you are in. So just change the organizations, the professional organizations, and fill in the blank with whatever you are, whether it be a PA or a nurse or a physical therapist, etc. But oftentimes you may hear people around you, your coworkers that you work with, have very negative views about the profession that you have chosen. But what I say to that, how to neutralize those negative thoughts, is be the change you want to see. If you're a laboratory professional, become a laboratory advocate. There's so many ways to do this. There are 17 laboratory medicine organizations that support our profession. For example, the ASCP, the ASCLS, the CLMA, the AABB, the AACC, and a host of other laboratory organizations. You can go out and investigate them and see how you can actively get involved in the discussions that impact our profession and start volunteering in these organizations to help our organizations be stronger, and to put your efforts into making changes where we all need to see changes happen. These organizations can't work without volunteers. They need perspectives from all different levels, from the phlebotomists to people who work in the industry to people who work in sales. We need all of our perspectives to help make our profession better and more sustainable. So remember that you are in control of the outcomes for your career and for your life. One thing that I love to encourage people to do is to practice visualizing, whether that be meditation or however you plan to visualize, but try to manifest, internally, mentally, the things that you want to see happen in your life. And you can even put those down physically by making, vision boards or goals. There are electronic ways to make vision boards, or you can do the old fashioned, getting a poster board and just gluing things and positive words to it. But in some type of way, try to visualize and manifest the things that you want to see. Also, I encourage you guys to think outside the box. Like what me and my co-hosts are doing right now, podcasting. Or there's an awesome lab advocate, Tiffany Gill, Medical Lab Lady Gill, who has her own YouTube. There's Twitter chats that are extremely popular. You can use social media, because there are some really fast growing platforms in social media where we can become very known, and you can use those platforms to advocate with a potential worldwide reach. I mean, this podcast does reach internationally. And so, use that. Think of ways to think outside of the box to help people learn about your profession, to help people understand the challenges and the barriers that are going on in your profession, and then to help work with not only your local colleagues or cohorts, but your regional ones, your statewide ones, and your international ones to make things better. In terms of benefits of doing this, it gives people who are not in your profession a peek into what is going on in your profession, to understand the challenges in your profession, so they can be more sympathetic to it, or empathetic to it, or even help. It gives you exposure. It helps promote career paths and growth. And it also virtually connects you to an increased network where you can obtain support for whatever you feel like you need support for. And so if we go back to that negative thinking and that complaining and that venting, now I'm venting with a purpose, right? If I'm talking to another laboratory professional about the workforce shortage and how we need more laboratory people, they may know a school that I can connect with, and I can start, really enticing some of the students or something where I feel like now I'm venting with the purpose because there's an action plan that can help solve the problem that I'm having. So those are my strategies for helping you neutralize negative thinking and helping you potentially change your perspective on some of the things you're going through, and to help you manage your mindset. Help you manage your mindset internally, that internal environment. Help manage your mindset with your team, and help manage your mindset about your profession. So I hope that some of these tips and tidbits have been helpful to you guys out there. A short podcast to give you some strategies to go about your day a little bit better, and to create some more peace in what we're all doing, because we all need more peace, right? Well, in conclusion, thank you for tuning in and checking out this episode of the Elaborate Topics. Be sure to leave me a comment. Let me know how you have been practicing through this pandemic, post-pandemic, through these different waves at managing your mindset. I'd love to hear more from all of you guys. There's never too much to talk about on this topic. If you like what you heard and you want to listen to our previous episode, please subscribe to our podcast at directimpactbroadcasting.com. And this podcast is available at Apple, Spotify, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Send us an email at elaboratetopics@directimpactbroadcasting.com to learn more about this topic or to be a guest on our show. We're always looking for guests. We're always honored to have guests on to hear their different perspectives. Be sure to like and share this episode and tune in next week to hear another amazing episode of the Elaborate Topics podcast. And until then, have an amazing day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Elaborate Topics, where your hosts discussed relevant strategies for laboratory professionals. Please subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and listen to us on directimpactbroadcasting.com. Stay tuned for another episode with information you can use to excel in your laboratory career.